Maunga tautiri wharepuhunga paneha kua ahau. No Ngāti Raukawa, Ngāti Maniapoto Waikato Huki ahau. And the Waipā Māori Ward for the last 2 and a little bit years. And it was because of an application to an incineration plant that we still haven't had a final decision for Te Awamutu. It was the reason that I ran for council. And anybody that knows me knows that that's not usually my MO. I'm usually one of the people on the outside making local government and central government accountable for anything and everything that they do. So never ever sort of envision myself to be in this space. However, I'm very grateful to people like Valerie, Zero Waste, Parakore, Jackie Forbes, and all the crew that have highlighted to me way at the start about the regeneration incineration crew who highlighted to me about the application from Global Metal Supplies. Initially, really hesitant to take on something that needed a lot of awareness, and our community didn't know, I don't think, and a lot of them still aren't aware of, I think, the bigger awareness around incineration and what it can bring. After touching base with Val and Jackie and hearing what was destined for Te Awamutu, it was really heartbreaking to find out that 2 people of our waka, of Tainui waka, had signed off the application on behalf of their iwi. And right from the word go, I always maintained to everybody within the campaign that we started and still have going, which is Don't Burn Waipā, is that we held a tikanga-led based campaign. And why I say that explicitly is because my uncle and my whanaunga, who were the people that signed off and supported the application, were given a really greenwashed application. And these 2 gentlemen, they are very community driven, and all their lives they have dedicated to their hapori, their communities. So hand on heart, when we all realised that they had been, I say it, and it's my personal view, it's not these aren't views with a council hat on, that they were duped, and they were not given the risk and the the downfalls and the pitfalls that we know that incineration and how bad it is. So for one of our uncles who is an esteemed academic, I could see how easily it would have been for his nephew, who is the director of the is the applicant, and one of the directors of the organisation. When you're there to stand to make millions and millions and millions, you're going to sell something really well to your uncle to get it over the line. And so, I can see where the 2 uncles signed off something that they thought was going to be really something good for the community. But we're not given the risk. So they did that. The other downfall that I think has been a learning lesson for another part of iwi is the legislative mechanisms that I would have expected from one of the post-group entities. And that was the trigger mechanisms in regards to the water. that the applicant wanted to source or anywhere working around the water, particularly those tributaries that run to the Waipā that then go into the Waikato. So there's, as many of us know, within the treaty settlements, we have a few triggers around that space that I think, my personal opinion, as someone who's elected to Waikato Tainui the whakakitenga, I believe they should have been triggers that should have been pulled. But to bring context to that situation, when I went to the particular entity, the person who I was, would have and went to had actually just resigned from the position. And well, I just think that they'd finished in the job. When they resigned, they resigned in everything. So there's been lessons that have been learnt, I think, at the entity, and there are different people in the roles that I think have put a tikanga in place, and that tikanga has had to be strengthened on the back of the new process of fast tracking and things like that anyway. So the application, in one way, had good effects for sorting out internal mechanisms, I want to say, that I think we need to do better at a tribal level. But I also acknowledge that at tribal levels, we are several ministries trying to solve 100 or 1,001 things all at once. So in the tile space, I believe that's one of the strengths that I have sitting in the house, is looking and making sure that I'm banging the drum to look after Papatūānuku in that space. So yeah, I was a little bit disappointed with the entity not pulling those triggers at the time. I then had to pivot because we had the elections for the Māori Ward at the time when everybody had the elections come up for Māori Wards, and I wasn't running for that, and we had 4 people running at the time. And when they all decided to run, I asked the question, who was going to support the application and who wasn't. And I wasn't happy with the response I got from the candidates. So I ran a candidates evening, and I told everybody in the community to come to the hui and ask about this kaupapa that was being put forward, and what our candidates were going to do about it. So in the end, we had our first Māori Ward be appointed, but there was no movement, and at that time, Val, Jackie, and a few others were really helping me galvanise some traction in Te Awamutu to get it going, the awareness going. From there, we had an incident with the first person who sat in the role of the Māori Ward, and they resigned from the role. So then came the by-election, and I asked the question again to 3 candidates who were going to re-stand, who was going to, support this darn application, because by that stage too, it had moved to certain spaces, and one person was one of them that signed off the support for the application. The other person was my auntie, and she sat on the fence. And then the other person was the chair of my other marae down in Maniapoto, and he was kind of for it as well. So it was kind of do or die for me, and I thought, oh, bugger it, I better put my head in the ring. And I just couldn't sit with having someone supported at an elected member level, and if I sort of try and get to a point where I could try and advocate at that elected member level and bring more of awareness of why we shouldn't do it, and also try and bring light to what were the policies and procedures, which I then realised once I got into council were very light in Waipā anyway. And I mean that in the sense of, if anybody's looked at our climate action strategies or anything like that, we have a really wonderful person in our role, but that person has hardly got any teeth to do anything. And and I say that with the full honesty, with the council hat on. And I'm not afraid to say that we are lucky that our awesome person that we do have in that role has a lot of support in the regional space. And they actually, it's the first cousin to Willa Jean Prime, and he is wonderful, and he does a really marvelous job at trying to do stuff at Waipā. But yeah, unfortunately, we have a table that is quite heavy on being anti climate action. So that's another dynamic that sits in the space as well. But I sort of took a little bit of lead though. So being in the regeneration, not incineration space, I was lucky to have been around. I was actually protesting at the local government New Zealand conference in Palmerston North for the fielding kaupapa. And little did I foresee that I would be at the local government conference the next year in Christchurch on the inside. It was a huge thing when I won the by-election, because then it enabled me to really put some traction to highlighting how dumb the application was for our town. But I sort of took lead from people who have been in the activism space a long time, like Val, and found out who the buyers were to places like Fonterra. And unfortunately, in Aotearoa, there's people like us in this hui that care about papatuanaku, but sometimes that's not the angle that you've got to take in specific districts like mine. And I say that with love, because I'm not anti-farming, I'm just anti-farming pollution. And anti-corporate farming pollution and all of that goes with that. However, I'm mates with Fonterra until we sort this incineration bullshit out. And I got hold of a few of their buyers across the world, and I gave them the evidence, which I have to be really grateful from Zero Waste and people like Val who were arming me. Heather was another one, Angela, a leader, everyone that was bringing all the information that they were bringing into that forum. I cannot be more grateful for. That was some of the stuff that I armed my emails with. And of course, you've got to use every lever you've got in your back pocket. And some of them were knowing that one of my cousins was part of the legal at Fonterra, and so sending the email to the CEO and copying her in was a deliberate strategy so that it wouldn't end up the EA just dumping it into the delete folder. So I had to put up with my cousin for half an hour moaning at me on the "don't ever bloody all copy me into those emails ever again," but I didn't really care, because she gets paid heaps and she's still there, and it got to the where it needed to go, because I got a phone call back from the CEO, and of course he couldn't put anything in text, but what he did say on the phone is that they'd engaged with a planner because of my communications, and particularly because I had gone out to their buyers, and it was a deliberate move to make sure that if I could hurt the pocket that helps feed the Fonterra, I was going to use that way. And I say that in knowing that, the economic impact of Fonterra actually shutting down in Waipā would be devastating. That would be for employment and all of that. I mean, for the environment, it would be, a whole other level. And I say that, with a smile. But we know that, for premium product stuff and for employment and all of that it does have, it would be damaging. And so I also acknowledge that they have done some work on their emission stuff, and I think they spent about 10 mil on changing their emissions ways at the Te Awamutu plant. So I put a heavy emphasis on saying, you know, here you're going to have this paru chap across the way, only about 300 metres from you, that's going to paru up, you know, your space that you've deliberately been working in. So it was really nice, and even to have that confirmed at local government conference, because if anyone knows, that bloody conference is out of it, because, you know, you get DPNZ and all of them in the middle there at the expo there, and they give away all the ice creams in the world and all of this. They've got a coffee machine that runs for you day and night and all types of shit. But, you know, to have the person that deals with one-on-one with the Prime Minister, you know, reassuring me that if it got approved at the EPA level, where it got to the Board of Inquiry level, that they would fight it. And so I was really pleased to hear that. But, you know, it still took a while to get to that stage. We had, you know, like Angela, like everybody knows, there's 1,001 things that you have to do to try and keep the fight on. And of course, around my elected member table, people were for it. At the community board level, people were for it. So those were different levels that we had to have a go at as well. And to be honest, I went to the business community and just let them know how it would hurt them and hurt their profits. And that's sort of the avenue I would go with. I would say the majority of the communities that are similar to mine, none of them like their profits affected. Nobody likes their profits affected, you know, ingo wā katoa. But there's I don't know, Waipā have a different, they're a different breed over here. They are. And when I went to the real estate agents and a few of them, and even when Fonterra got on board and told their farming community how this was going to be detrimental to them, I even had, you know, a community member who went really hard on how this will affect our own gardens at home, and really getting people in that emotional space there, but definitely went on the money, you know, focusing on how that would affect profits. And that was what Te Awamutu responded to. I think in the whole of it, one of the biggest things I'll take from this, and I'm already having conversations down in Te Nehi Nui, because we have heard, you know, it's hearsay at this stage. I don't know if, you know, Val and Whana might be a little bit more on this. I'm a bit consumed with just trying to get bloody Māori wards over the line at the moment. But we hear that the group is exploring, looking for land in Te Kuiti. And my inside, I'm just thinking, you know, they're getting ready to pivot. They've held brakes. They know that it's probably not looking good at the Board of Inquiry level, and this whole not paying their bills situation, which has stalled the process, I think is just another way for them to look at how they're going to come back. But yeah, with the experiences I've had, I'm already having conversations with whānau down there to be ready for that. And I'm already challenging the PGSC down there as well, because that is one of the benefits when you become an elected member. You can have some of those conversations at higher levels that you never get to usually have. It's, you know, local government, not a space I like, but when it comes to these types of things, this is the types of stuff that it was nice to be able to have sit down one-on-one conversations with other elected members who I challenged, and I said to them, "Oh, you know, you just see just this angry Māori woman, but how about you sit down with me and we'll go through the information I have, which is all the information that Zero Waste and whānau had armoured me with over the years. And it was great to be able to sit at those levels and be able to chat about that.
Mm.
In the end, when it got to a decision, I was pleasantly surprised of who came over the line at the elected member table. But I'll be brutally honest too. I don't know if that would have been the same outcome, and I'm not trying to blow my own head up, but I don't know whether that would have had the same outcome if I hadn't have had the chance to do any advocacy at that level. The naivety of how council has to host consent applications. I think that's a real key thing in educating whānau. Like, we got a problem, Kaurangi, you probably know about that quarry, that silicon quarry thing out at Cambridge. Don't worry, cuz it'll hit your it'll hit your desk soon, probably. I look at how the commissioners have approved that one, and whānau, people want and community want to do all this stuff, but they don't realise that there's an appeal that's gone in, and how that fits within the process. And my own naivety, I didn't know that stuff either, but the kind of stuff that I think has to be really clear at the start, to have I don't know, just a step-by-step method for people to understand how these things roll. Because when I've that's something I've constantly had to tell people over time within the campaign. We can't just chuck it out, or we can't just do this. I now realise how flawed local government process is, and how they don't keep to their own policies and stuff like that. So in these types of situations, you can't connect the dots to just get rid of something that we know is unhealthy, doesn't fit with the spatial plans or future proofing and all of those bloody things. But albeit all those high level strategic things have really good meaning, but when it drops down to how this actually affects us in the communities, it's abominable. And yeah, it really needs to go to a moratorium. But I don't know whether it needs to go there while we got this shambolic freaking government there. I would rather the moratorium happened under next year, after next elections, because I don't have faith in this government doing the moratorium. Yeah, and I don't. Oh gosh, sorry, and I think I'm rambling, but yeah, I can't be more grateful for the people that have kept the campaign, because, of course, once I got into Blimmin Council, I then had to step away because I had 1,001 complaints coming at me in council that I was a conflict of interest in everything. So that was a doozy in itself. But grateful to the Ians and Nicks and Angies and Ethans and Jens of this world that on the committee that did that committee. We also have a Waipā Sustainable Trust out of that now. It brought awareness to a whole lot of stuff. Unfortunately, with the two uncles that did sign that off at the start, I haven't been able to convince a few people in that movement about how crucial it is for te tiriti, and the fabrics of it being the last doorstop to environmental problems and that we face, and that te tiriti is that last backstop to supporting Papatūānuku. So that's been hard. And like I said at the start, it's been really difficult with the dynamics that I have around racism and a few other things that are high dynamics in my area. So, yeah, Val, I don't know whether that my kōrero is purposeful or But I think the iwi now, the iwi entities, they are one of them is a lot more savvy on how they are dealing with stuff. I must admit, I have challenged them around if we do have these fast track things, what are the types of conditions and heavy conditions they would be thinking about applying. I'm getting to a stage where I'm getting really impatient and getting sort of stamping my feet within the governance house and asking about, hey, what the hell's happening? What are you guys doing? What's the tikanga here? I'm asking around, and only while I've got this elected member privilege, asking what are the done. What are the, I'm trying to say, the frameworks or the mechanisms they are having to screen businesses and potential partnerships and that are good environmental businesses, and how are we doing that better? So even within council, I've been challenging them in that space around how we do things better. I've been saying to them, the lady we have at council in the waste minimisation space, I know she too, like our climate action person, has limited teeth and resource to do really good work. And we lost Sally to Waikato District. And we're not even good managers in our own district. I keep whopping on about the jewel over in Raglan that needs to be duplicated across Waikato and Waipā. And so one of the things I hopefully have got some traction with at Waipā in my last council meeting, which was a beauty, here's those dogs, is that I've challenged the council to go and ask the new waste management provider we've got, Evolve, I think their name is, have come into our district. What's their diversifying of their model for the future? And can we look at a way of getting some funding to help them diversify that will provide us with a model that is a lot like in line with extreme waste in Raglan. But I've also challenged them around looking at what initiatives could Waipā look at repurposing small plastic waste, and how could we generate little initiatives to deal with some of that stuff. Like I think there's a place in the top of the South Island that's dealing with some of that soft plastic waste. So, not trying to look at ways that we can be a little bit more innovative, but not selling my ethics out is one of the hardest things to do at council. And yeah, I'm just to the rest of my peers, I think I'm just that angry Māori woman that's always banging on about waste and looking after the environment and no incineration. And yeah, I'm saving them from a whole lot of litigation cases and pointing out to them that they need to vote better. And I think that's about me, Val, because I don't know. Banging on, mate. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dale-Maree. There's a lot in your corridor there, and I think a lot of good questions and thoughts that will be prompted out of that. So, yeah, really appreciate that. I'm going to turn over to Sue Coutts, and I'll just put the spotlight on Sue. And Sue's going to talk a little bit about some of the other technologies and greenwashing kind of coming down the pipe. So over to you, Sue.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dale-Maree. It was really great to hear your tale of greenwashing and how we counter that. And I guess that's a bit what I'm going to focus on is a lot of that about. When we look around, I'm going to focus a bit on plastic as well, because that's something that's an issue in New Zealand, just very topical at the moment. So, when we look around, it's really easy to see that we've got a big plastic problem. Plastic production's doubled between 2000 and 2020, and then it's going to double again by 2050 if we carry on the same way. Recycling's been the get out of jail card that the industry's used so far, but only about 10% of the plastic that's ever been produced has been recycled so far. The recycling that we are doing is more likely to be downcycling, and the recycled content is usually more contaminated with harmful additives than the virgin plastic. And there's a whole wave of technologies that are being pitched. Like you guys have been hearing about them all around the country. They're called advanced recycling methods for plastics often, or forms of waste to energy, chemical recycling, pyrolysis, gasification, rubbish-derived fuel, plast oil, sustainable aviation fuel, and then waste to energy incineration are all pitched as, these, we're going to be saved by them. But basically, all they are really is ways to burn plastic in one form or another. These technologies are put up as ways to manage hard to recycle plastics. And the reason that these plastics are hard to recycle is that they've been designed that way. They're combinations of different materials, they're loaded with harmful additives, and they're often really time consuming to clean and prepare for recycling. They haven't been designed to be safe. The business models have been designed to focus on single use rather than reuse, and establishing separate collections and sorting and processing and reprocessing facilities for all of these hard to recycle plastics is massively complex and expensive. Around the world, when we look at the evidence, there's a lot of these technologies that have failed, and it's either been, the economic model has fallen over, or the tech has failed. And so we're seeing a lot of companies like around the world, Unilever, Coca-Cola, Nestle, Colgate Palmolive, they're starting to fund systems to collect and supply single-use packaging to cement companies to use them as fuel in cement production. It gives them a really handy greenwash smokescreen, and it's just like a smoke and mirrors story that they can tell their customers that they've got this great answer for what's all the plastic that they're pumping out, and it suits the cement companies as well because they get free or cheap fuel. About 8% of global emissions comes from cement production, and changing from coal to plastics is an opportunity to greenwash their production process. But burning a ton of plastic emits a ton of greenhouse gas, so it's really just a substitution strategy rather than a genuine emissions reduction that they're achieving. So globally, the cement industry is very poorly regulated and monitored. Compliance and enforcement is very weak, especially in poorer countries. And as Dale-Maree's saying, in New Zealand, we just don't have a good regulatory framework either. Companies are just there is some testing that gets done, but they just can't keep pace with the rapidly changing feedstocks that they're having to deal with. The companies run the same old chicken and egg argument. So they say things like, we're not advocating for more plastic production, but we're encouraging the responsible management of unrecyclable plastic that already exists. And setting up cement plants to run on plastic waste just means that there's really little or no incentive for producers to reduce plastic production or to reduce the amount of harmful additives that are in their plastics. It also means they're really unlikely to support calls for producer responsibility, and that might drive changes in their business models or their packaging and product design, or mean that they would cover the real costs of high quality recycling or start to shift to reuse. Here in our world, we just get sold this line that plastic is safe and convenient. We've got a lot of disposable income as a country, so we're targets. Producers always coming up with new things to sell us and new ways to package them up. And it's all about that transaction between the buyer and the seller. And all the story about safety and convenience is focused on the moment where that cash changes hands, because that's what matters to the producer. We get told that plastic packaging is so cheap and so useful and so safe. But our experience of convenience rides on the back of all the costs and risks and damage that get pushed out in space, out onto other people and other places, onto the ecosystems that we depend on, and to other times in the future. And whether we burn it or bury it, the damage is really already done, because it's what happens upstream in the extraction and the production phase, the ecosystem damage, the emissions that are generated, the biodiversity loss, that has an even greater impact than what happens downstream. The disposal end, you have the effects like Dale-Maree's talking about with air, water, and soil pollution and how that affects our health and our ecosystems. But it's what happens upstream that's the kicker. So designing out waste and pollution has to be our number one goal. We know what we need to do to decarbonise the petrochemical industry. We've got to reduce the amount of plastic that's being made and reduce the amount of artificial fertiliser use. But that's only going to happen if we really keep the pressure on. When we're thinking about, what would the production and use of safe and sustainable chemicals and plastics look like, you've got to be thinking about the waste hierarchy, zero in on resource efficiency and focus on prevention and reuse. you've got to be thinking about essential use so that you're only using plastics in situations where they're critical for society and there's no suitable alternative. And you've got to prioritize safety. So changing the inputs to create safe, non-toxic, decontaminated products and packaging. PVC is a really great example. You know, we were planning to ban some PVC packaging for food in New Zealand, and we've pushed that back. Our government has pushed that back. In Europe, they're starting to ask questions about, you know, does this product create an unacceptable risk? Is there an adequate control mechanism? And those sorts of questions in New Zealand, we're really not asking about the stuff that's coming onto the market. And PVC is problematic because it's polyvinyl chloride as the basic polymer. There's issues with release of toxins through production, produces dioxins and furans when it gets burned. Workers get exposed to polymer dust. It releases microplastics, which also contain toxic additives. And PVC needs much more additives than other plastic types to make it versatile. The additives in the plastics are used to make it behave in certain ways. So in PVC, there's 470 plus different additives, and they often have, you know, a variety of hazardous properties, like phthalates used to make it flexible, and then there's a lot of stabilizers to manage the degradation. And it's common for PVC products, you know, we think of additives as being these little bit of stuff that goes in at the end to make it do what we want it to, but PVC products can have 25% of additives by weight. And if you're talking about soft plastics used in medical uses, vehicles, consumer goods, they can be as much as 50% of the weight in your plastic could be additives. So, you know, that's one reason why it's really not so great to burn flock from vehicle shredding. And we know that there's safe alternatives. So, you know, there's plenty of other alternatives for us. So that little case study of PVC is, you know, there's lots of practical things that we could do to change the way things are. So companies really want to put their products out onto the market. They want to get the cash flow and collect the profit, but they really balk at covering the real cost of reducing the negative impacts that their products have on our health and on ecosystems. Basically, you know, they fudge the language and the outcomes, and they do their best not to talk about the harmful emissions. It's the equivalent of wish cycling, and it's a constant battle to try to make sense of their claims. I'm just going to jump across. We just got, you know, tight on time. So, you know, we're seeing a lot of fails, you know, even if we give them the benefit of the doubt and don't see them as just being super cynical. You know, companies like Shell have backed out of its commitment to use 1 million tons of plastic waste in its global chemical plants. Companies that signed up to the, you know, packaging reusable, recyclable or compostable by 2025, and then did nothing to redesign it to make it that way or to set up systems to be able to harvest it. You know, that they come back with pretty weak arguments like, oh, gee, it turned out it was a bit harder than we thought. So there's a lot of better ways that we can invest in our future, and Giulio and Carla are going to talk a bit about that. Finding solutions mean we really have to go upstream and start looking at the design side of things. You know, as Val said, the last 5 years, communities really been fighting these proposals off one by one, and we just can't afford to keep wasting our time and energy on that. We've got a petition that we'd love you to sign, you know, to keep Aotearoa incinerator free, and there's heaps of useful information on our website. Yeah, so, you know, really awesome hearing you guys today, just talking about how by working together we really can keep it Aotearoa incinerator free.
Kia ora, Sue. Thank you very much. Gosh, there's lots in what you said. And again, I feel like I was just taking some notes, and I've got a few questions myself to, I guess, pick your brain a little bit about some of that plastic waste. So yeah, just encourage everybody to think a little bit about what are some of those questions. And I'm going to turn over to Carla and Giulio, who I'm going to spotlight here when I can find. Got you there. And they're going to do a little presentation for us about the kind of positive sides of things. So some of the real solutions that are actually happening now. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. Can everybody see my screen? Is that visible?
Yeah.
The drums.
Yeah, all good.
Awesome. Yeah, and thanks for the beautiful kōrero, Sue and Dale-Maree. That was really inspiring. Yeah, But yeah, kia ora koutou katoa, ko Giulio Lauda taku ingoa, and I'm the site manager here at Tāmaki Zero Waste Hub, where I'm actually speaking from today. Yeah, and with me is Carla, so I'll let you introduce yourself, Carla.
Yeah, kia ora, and yeah, thank you so much, Dale and Sue. Inspiring and really amazing to hear more about what's going on behind the scenes, and it's so hard to tell people why it's so bad, because on the outside it looks so good, right? So yeah, I'm the GM. I get to oversee the management of Tāmaki Wairau and Whangaproa Zero Waste Hubs, and for localised. So we are the commercial arm of Zero Waste Aotearoa, and our job is to grow the scale of impact and community-led resource recovery around the country. Over the last 6 years, we've established 7 new sites and operate in partnerships with community organisations, private enterprise and local government. Our number one aim is to return dividends to the Zero Waste Network, Aotearoa, to ensure, the team can continue advocating and working at government level to pull those levers as change. So it's awesome working with you on this, and we're very, very lucky to have you leading and steering the waka on this one. So over our 3 hubs, we've got 35 staff. We've only been going 3 years. And incredibly proud of the work that we do. And although it's a doom and gloom situation that we've been talking about, I think now we can really highlight, the community aspect of community-led resource recovery and what you can create, which we're super proud of. So I'll hand it over to Giulio to tell the story of Tāmaki Zero Waste.
Yeah, kia ora again. Thanks, Carla, introduction, but I just wanted to sort of frame everything that I'm going to be speaking around. That what we're trying to do is really to try to reconnect waste or resources back to their whakapapa, which is something that I heard through the Zero Waste Hui not so long ago, which I really liked in terms of framing. But I'll be talking a little bit around what we do here at Tāmaki Zero Waste Hub as a little bit of like a smile at the end of some of these conversations that seem a little bit downward. But I guess for those of you that don't know, here at Tāmaki Zero Waste Hub, we run a number of Auckland Council contracts. The inorganics redistribution contract, which is quite unique to Tāmaki Makaurau in the way that operates. The community recycling centre, obviously trying to focus on the community side, but that is quite common in this area. There's about 14 and a few more in development under the same roof here. We've got reuse hubs under the same roof as well, which are in-house tenants. We got a Trade Me store that helps us reach more national markets for our reuse, and a community bookable space for local events, education, as well as repair workshops and repair cafes, all the way through to waste audits.
I guess to add to that really quickly, Giulio, I think although we do rely quite heavily on Auckland Council contracts, I guess you can see from what Giulio said is we are trying to diversify our revenue stream and create a strong business that doesn't rely so much on council contracts, but we definitely need that support to get us started. But with our tenants and with those bookable spaces, and we're doing good with that aspect of business, which is cool.
Our kaupapa really is keeping resources out of landfill through community work, and I like this intricacy here because we're doing the mahi, but really is with a focus in community building through the use of this material that we have access to. So what I kind of like to think about it as zero waste and protecting Papatuanuku and community. And obviously, we try to work with some levers of change. We were running multiple infrastructural services, with the recycling centre, with the organics redistribution. They are places where the community can access to either let go of material as well as pick up material. But really, we also trying to work in tandem with changing mindset, creating new value systems, really to try to create a new cultural identity when it comes to resourcing. So it's kind of mixing the two together. So supporting sort of action and behaviour change in the community. And obviously our revenue all goes to Zero Waste Aotearoa, so we are also sort of active within the legislative change lever as well. We feel like that as well anyway. We try to focus on the top part of the waste hierarchy, although we work within the bottom of the hill, and we're that ambulance which is trying to do its best to mop everything up. But obviously we try to focus on reuse before recycling. Separation is the name of the game when it comes to all of these, both reuse and recycling. But we utilize a bunch of voluntary practices as well to keep on top of the game, like degassing of refrigerator gases. We are experimenting with extracting mineral oil from oil heaters and trying to find the best way possible to dispose of these materials. Although there's no sort of regulation or barrier for us to not to, and everybody else is in the same position. We could easily, or everybody could easily in Tāmaki Makaurau as well as New Zealand, be throwing these materials straight into a recycling plant to extract the metals without any regard to those more harsh chemicals and gases. And there's a part of this also, this conceptualization around reuse and recycling, which I like to think about. And the goal for me in the long run with this centre is in the community is to help separate these two ideas from one another. Quite often in our community here, recycling is sort of intermingled and wraps reuse into it. So I'd like our knowledge to transpire back into the community to try separate these two ideas fully. So that'll be a signifier of success. Slowly unveiling the less preferable option that recycling is often viewed as this golden bullet. Try to get rid of that misconception. With that being said, we're pretty proud to kind of sit around 90% diversion at our site. Despite moving hundreds of tons through this place, so it's quite exciting. Like I was saying before, we do operate a community recycling centre with a focus on that community. So it's really an alternative for the domestic curbside collection here in Tāmaki Makaurau, with the community having access to 40 plus recycling streams rather than a simple commingled system, as well as large items such as refrigerators, mattresses, and those all hard to recycle materials that are starting to exit the commingled system in Tāmaki Makaurau, such as polystyrene, Tetra Pak, and so on. But obviously, we try to really have the community have the ability to find these materials back into a retail store where we offer affordable necessities at a very high aesthetic, which is kind of where I wanted to go with this point, where aesthetics I feel like is quite an important aspect of how we present material back into the community. Us showing the respect that we want the community to be giving the material, and it rubs off essentially. We're creating new value standards and it's essentially practicing what we preach, right? From the valuing, from the taking the dust away, from the cleaning, all the way to sort of sometimes creative reuse of such some materials that come through for shelving, or upside down toys to act as stands, and that sort of thing. Being playful, I think, is quite a useful tool. Comedy as well. So yeah, being playful within how we display is important to kind of get that public buy-in. That other contract that really is key to us is the inorganics redistribution contract. So if you're not sure what the inorganics is, it's kind of known as the inorganics in Tāmaki Makaurau. It's that cubic meter of material that you often see on the side of the road that you're able to book through the council to be picked up. It's a 4-year service, and it's repair funded, and it's really the idea behind this service is, yes, to pick up the material from your house, but it's that back end. So this material is triaged by us and then offered back into the community for free. We've got about 300 community groups that are actively involved with this service at the moment. And it's really to allow them to do the important mahi that they want to do within their own community. We know that we don't have the absolute reach that we want to, so we try to empower other community groups through reselling, through upcycling and gifting to do that mahi. These materials often go to family centres as well as social housing clients, all the way through to other partners, community partners, like for bicycle upcycling as well. Matters being one of them. I just wanted to touch on volunteers as well. We work with volunteers quite a bit. We don't want to replace paid positions with volunteers, but I think they do play a key part in complementing what we do. But also, volunteers often function as educators within their own community in our space, helping the locals understanding our kaupapa, and again, to help with that cultural shift. And something that's quite interesting, which has happened with our community, is that within a few months, a lot of our volunteers have actually upgraded to become part-time or full-time staff. Which is quite a beautiful story for us, which kind of shows how volunteers can really grow within an organisation that is trying to be sustainable, not only materially but also culturally. We got some reuse hubs, or a quarter of our big warehouse is dedicated to some reuse tenants. There's a number of different types of operations, from sole traders, upcyclers, redevelopers, charities and artists that work alongside us. And I think the important part here is that we are helping these hubs or these practitioners with the harder side of booking a commercial lease, health and safety, the sort of hard back end of really being operational, that goes beyond being in your own backyard or your own garage, as well as that real cultural aspect, having a kapa beside them, having the kai, feeling part of a community, asking for help, and having that diversity of practitioners next to each other to help each other problem solve around reuse and upcycling, which is quite exciting. Yeah, that sharing of knowledge. And yeah, it's essentially that incubator model. We're trying to support them. It's a really tough place to be out there as a sole trader in this space. The amount of time that you often have to put into an artwork or a creation, outweighs what the market is willing to pay for it when you have such high competitors and IKEAs and Temus popping up and way more impactful when it comes to their advertising. So we try to do things like give them a sales space, operate at quite a reasonable margin when it comes to repaying us for selling through the shop, as well as helping them with a tapered rental scheme from when they start becoming tenants in our warehouse. Going from a few months of rent-free all the way through to standard commercial lease rates within 12 months. And I thought I'd just touch on red stickered homes and the mahi that we're doing around construction and demolition work at the moment, which a lot of the community recycling centres are doing. So for those of you that don't know, we got hit pretty hard by a storm here a few years ago, and the approach that the Auckland Council has taken was to partner with community recycling centres around Tāmaki Makaurau to try rehome this material. They talk about roughly $1.2 million worth of recovered building materials that's gone back to these sites, and obviously, that's the sort of net value of them, but it comes with a few challenges, through domestic sale of these items and really paying off the labor that's involved with making this material available again. But it's really about starting to stimulate this part of the secondhand economy, which is not quite there yet, either through regulation and through culture. Yes, Aotearoa is quite a do-it-yourself place, but it's still, the volumes that are coming through are exceeding what the market is currently able to absorb. But by weight, construction and demolition is definitely quite a large chunk of the waste problem. So it's definitely a part of the sector that we want to keep an eye on. It's a new and exciting challenge logistically, but the sheer volume of native timber that we've seen come through this project has made it worthwhile for sure. And just to close off, if the waste stream, if waste was seen as a stream, we like to see ourselves as a wetland, slowing down material for community to access and nurture the environment around us. So, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, and thank you for listening.
Kia ora, Giulio. Thank you so much, mate. Thank you, Carla.
Yeah, no problem. That was a proud moment for me, watching all the hard mahi that Giulio and I have been doing. And nice work, Giulio. Thank you.
I will just put us back on a spotlight here, and I just want to open the floor here for any questions and comments from people. If there's kōrero that people want to share about this issue, and or ask questions, or just really invite people to do that at this stage. You want to put your hand up or just unmute yourself. He a koutou.
While people are thinking of their questions, one thing I did forget to say is that if anyone's ever up in Tāmaki Makaurau and wants to come and visit any of our sites, get inspired, have a look around, get in contact, the door's always open, and we're really, really happy to share because we know everybody needs a little bit of inspiration, and if you come into Tāmaki Zero Waste, you'll sure walk away inspired. Sorry to butt in.
Kia ora, Carla. That's awesome. What a great invite. Dale-Maree, get up there for a visit. I think it is really inspiring, the stuff that's going on in Auckland with the zero waste hubs. I really wish that we had those kind of reuse hubs down here and that kind of space here in Pōneke, where there's a real paucity of those kinds of workshop spaces for reuse activities. That would be super, super cool. Yeah, on a personal level, my partner does a lot of metalworking with scrap metal. Yeah, and it would be super great to have some kind of space to do that kind of, exactly that kind of stuff. So yeah, love to see the kind of really creative stuff that's happening up at the Zero Waste Hubs. Is there any kōrero that people want to share? Anything about incinerators, Te Awamutu, Waimati, fielding, any of the stuff Sue talked about, any of the advanced technologies, any of the kōrero Dale-Maree brought? Everybody's bamboozled by your amazingness.
Yeah,
Really,
I just thought it was so interesting to hear Dale-Maree talking about her experience in the council. You know, like we sort of, from the outside, it's always hard to understand just how it all works. And, you know, it often feels as though the regulatory framework that we have just isn't that great. And it's good to hear that confirmed, you know, that it's not a imagining from the outside, but that's the experience from the inside as well.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Somebody has asked, what is the status of incinerators throughout New Zealand? Sue, do you want to have a go?
Oh, that's a big question. Do you mean, I guess I'm wondering about whether it's the status of where are things at with the different ones? Is that what you think they mean? Yeah. Okay, so the one in Waimate is no longer live. It was part of the fast track process, and the land deal that they had fell through when they didn't, you know, follow up on their agreement to purchase. And so, as I understand it, Heather might be able to offer a better story about this, but you know, as I understand it, that basically meant that their application was no longer able to be progressed through that channel. In you know, Te Awamutu, then we've been through this board of inquiry process that Dale-Maree was talking about, which was, you know, a massive, you know, 3-week, I think, experience for people going through this hearing and lots of witnesses and lots of discussion and, you know, people putting their best foot forward with a really good argument for why we shouldn't have one, or, you know, if you're on the other side, why we should have one. And basically that's all been put on hold because the applicant hasn't paid their bill to the councils. So they haven't paid 50 grand or, you know, roughly 100 grand that they owe to the regional council and the Waipā District Council. So that means that their application is on hold until they pay it, which is super frustrating for everybody because we were all hoping that we would get a result out of this, which would give us an idea about what was going to happen next. And now we're just hanging on hanging around waiting to see if they're going to pay. If they do pay, what will happen? Will they progress the application? Doesn't sound like there's any sort of sunset clause on it to say, if you don't pay within 3 months, that's it for you. You go back to start, you know, do not pass go, do not collect your $200. So, you know, then we've got all these rumors about different things happening around the country. We've got, you know, possible one up around Kaipara somewhere, you know, then we've got these ideas of people, you know, that someone said whack-a-mole at the beginning, and that's really what it feels like, you know, that, I didn't succeed here, so I'm just going to try again somewhere else. And it's very difficult to know what's going on until an application actually shows up. But at the same time, you know, like I was saying, we've got these things which are not described as incineration, but they actually are, which is the Enviro Waste project chipping up plastic, which is, you know, hard to recycle or, you know, not able to be recycled in other ways, which is now going to be burnt in the cement plant, just another form of incineration, you know, it's just plastic to fuel. And also we've got other possible things going on with Shane Jones up in Marsden Point, you know, with his special economic zone or whatever. You know, it's possible that we could see some of these advanced recycling technology showing up there. In Australia, we've seen some of the there's in particular one place called Parks, which, you know, sounds like something out of The Simpsons. You know, they've set aside this area where the normal rules of engagement don't apply, and they're just going to let people have a bit of a free for all, doing all sorts of waste to energy stuff there, and see what happens. So, you know, we really don't want to see that happen in at Marsden Point up in Northland. So it's really watching brief. It's very, I think, you know, for Val and the guys that are working actively on the ground, the campaign, it's just very tiring. You know, you've got relentlessly things popping up, having to try to defeat them one by one. We've got our government this government and the previous government that wouldn't really take a stand and say, this is not our direction of travel, we're not going to go there, let's just knock it on the head for once and for all. And you think about Mason Durry and some of the words that came out in the fielding hearing where they're just saying, it doesn't make any sense to invest in these things which are going to do harm. We just can't afford to do that in our country. We can't afford to be investing in projects or infrastructure that we know is going to do harm to people in our environment and our business community like Fonterra. Really can't afford to go there. So that's my best effort on that question, Val.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. I think that's really useful, and I think it sort of goes together with some of the things that Dale-Maree's talking about in terms of that commercial imperative, is that essentially councils have very little ability themselves to stop these proposals coming forward. And so these proposals come forward, and it's not that there is a kind of a counterfactual. It's not as if we've got, hey, here's $100 million. Would you like to build a community resource recovery center like Tāmaki Zero Waste? Would you like to build an incinerator? It's a company comes in and says, let's build an incinerator. And then all of a sudden the community has to get mobilized and galvanized to fight against something that they never even knew was on the horizon, which really kind of came out of the blue. And certainly in the case with fielding, you actually had the council, the local council, the Manawatu District Council, kind of actively involved in trying to contract a waste to energy company to do a pyrolysis facility on the premises of their brand new resource recovery center. And they just really didn't actually understand. Like, I think that's the other thing is that it's certainly at some of the district council level and some regional council level, I think there's just not the level of expertise and knowledge around this stuff. We saw with one of the applications around Rotorua, around Rainbow Mountain, really dangerous proposal, really, really dangerous stuff, talking about doing pyrolysis of flock tires and plastics in the community there. Very, very high levels of toxic emissions, dioxins, furans, and the consenting conditions that were put in place for this really short-term trial were not adhered to. Like, they completely violated the conditions of this consent, but the consent already ran its 6-month trial period before anybody got any test results back. It was really a bit of a joke and quite astonishing, because it doesn't help to have consent conditions about protecting the environment and protecting people's health if you only find out that they've been violated kind of after the fact. The impacts have already happened, and you can say, oh, well, we'll fine you or we'll shut you down or whatever else. But the reality is that for the people who are experiencing breathing problems or fertility problems or cancer, none of that shit matters. Like, the impacts have been felt. And that's the reality. So that's, I think, for us, why we want to see a kind of a national response. And I think Kirsty has very helpfully asked the question, what can be done on a national level in terms of policy to nip this incineration stuff in the bud, thinking about pressure that we can put on opposition parties in the lead up to next year's election. So Sue, that sounds like a question for you.
Yeah, I guess the main thing is to just, they talk about, a lot of success with getting people to understand something or move forward with something is explaining to them what the problem is, so that in a way that they can understand. So, just really understanding that they're problematic, that when you burn plastic, you're generating greenhouse gas emissions, same as if you burn coal. When you, plastic is full of chemicals, many of which are problematic, that burning it is going to create more problems than it solves, that we really need to be going upstream and looking at what we're bringing into the market rather than, wasting all our time and energy fighting, firefighting at the bottom of the cliff. Some of those real basic points people just aren't getting, but we are seeing that, people like Barbara Kuriger and those kind of MPs that are operating in areas where there could be a incinerator, that idea of the threat is often what really kicks them over the line, and they go, oh, I wouldn't really want that to be next door to me. I wouldn't want it to be, we're seeing a lot of issues for Te Ao Mutu people, with just business decisions, or, am I going to buy a house, or am I going to sell a house, or am I going to do something like that. Yeah, sorry, I'm hard to hear.
Sue, are you there? Yeah, you're all right.
Yeah.
You're all right.
Yeah, so I think a lot of those kinds of things, just keeping going on about it, making sure people understand that they're problematic, that it's not, it's just a big greenwash strategy. Basically, they're saying it's all fine, you don't have to worry, nothing to see here. And we just have to really keep emphasizing that there really are issues, that it's just like the alcohol industry, the tobacco industry, the guys that are always banging on about how there's not really a problem until way after the fact, like Val says, and it turns out that we're all having health issues, our environment is, struggling. It's really important that we do just keep on talking to everybody about it. That's the best way to get the word out there.
Dale-Maree, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I think there's also the other thing where Heather, you might want to add to this a little bit, is these applications are coming in under the guise of things like housing developments, and silly things like that. Where I know that I'm looking at every big, massive housing development that's coming into Waipā now, and especially around some of these ones that are elderly resident, big villages in that. So I'm checking out what the heck is their waste systems in there. Are they trying to build a little incineration plant within their project? So it's something that I've challenged up north at the moment and said to up north, challenge all your candidates that are running at the moment, around all of this corridor of the kaipara plant that we've been hearing that GSIP and all of those have put into long-term plans and things like that. So, I'm trying to tell whānau up north at the moment to really get on the bandwagon with that. And I think I forgot to mention, way back when I was at Massey under Charlotte Severn, and we brought the 5 Gyres founders out, and we did the trawling for the plastic, small plastics in the Hikurangi Trench. I'll never forget how we pivoted with a couple of iwi around reducing plastic and the awareness around it. And it really, I think that's why I loved your corridor, Giulio, around kind of a bit more looking at the sexy aspect of things and how we need to sexy up it, more. Because, of course, if we burn things, we're not going to make money from things. But I think there's that sexy aspect. And, from someone who's dabbled in marketing and comms, I think there's a real loss. And so I know at Waipā I've really planted the seed around trying to socialise the sexy aspect of waste. So I really appreciated your presentation. So yeah.
Yeah, kia ora, Dale-Maree. There's just a couple of things I wanted to add in there, that Generation Zero has done a survey of local government candidates around the country. Obviously, not all of them answer the questions, but a number of them were surveyed, and they were asked specifically questions around do they support waste incineration or not. So that's on the Generation Zero, Gen Zero website, and that's a great opportunity really to evaluate kind of local government campaign and local government candidates in terms of this. But further to Kirsty's question, I think also is that kind of in respect of this campaign, the Regeneration Not Incineration campaign is really trying to connect the human health aspect of it and the community health aspect of it with different people, because I think human health and air pollution issues in particular are increasingly of concern around Aotearoa. We have a number of polluted air sheds around the country, and it seems kind of crazy in some ways, because it seems like a country with so much fresh air. But there are many, many places around the country that are incredibly polluted. And we've got real problems with that. We've got a lot of people dying. We've got something like 3,000 premature deaths in this country per year from air pollution. So it's a really serious issue. And the air pollution standards, the air quality standards in this country haven't been updated for a generation. And that is one of the major areas where we could see some real impacts, is if we adopted the United Nations, the World Health Organization guidelines on air pollution, which are already broadly accepted across New Zealand as the standard for things like consenting applications, would make that a higher threshold. But certainly prioritizing that kind of stuff. There are no national standards around dioxin and furan emissions, and those are the kinds of things that we would really like to see in place. Yeah. So I just wanted to ask Giulio and Carla a little bit of a sticky question, because you did talk a little bit about aesthetics, and Dale-Maree was talking about making things sexy. And I guess the question kind of came up a little bit at the Zero Waste Aotearoa, which is around the kind of proliferation of so much stuff that was only ever made to become rubbish in the first place, which is the kind of sheen clothing. But it's not just the clothing, it's a whole lot of things like electronics, which household items, which are effectively made to break. And I'm just wondering, how are you all dealing with that in terms of the resource recovery space?
I can speak from a like a site manager perspective, and I think some of the insight and some of the challenging insight that I've had to deal with is similar to Extreme Zero Waste, and their blockade towards sheen products, is that some products, the most ethical decision is actually to divert it in the safest way possible to landfill, rather than try to repopulate it into the community. You don't want half-baked e-waste going back into the community. We're talking about batteries doing pretty damaging things if you just sort of peddle it as reuse, and it's going to last another 2 or 3 weeks to a few months. So it's very much a sticky situation and quite challenging when it comes to even through your impact reports to council. They're like, well, why is this new material going to landfill? And you're trying to explain to them that this is actually the best thing possible for it, because the unseen consequences and costs, both socially and environmentally, are actually greater than just getting a few numbers up through that way. But yeah, I feel like there's a bigger conversation that's to be had around the general network around these sort of decisions, both regional but at national level as well. But maybe Carla's got some more regional insight.
Yeah, I think, it's about responding. I mean, soft plastics are a really great example. There's no end market for them, yet we've been collecting them, and now we have stocks and stocks of soft plastics, which are going to have to go to landfill, which is gutting for everybody. But there is, it is, just fake advertising that they're recyclable, really. Where are they all going? It's charging the consumer and making them aware of their decisions in the beginning. And I think a big campaign around take responsibility for what you're buying, and think that thing that you're buying, what are you going to do with it in the end? And I think really, really key, simple marketing and messages to get across to everybody, that as soon as they're buying something, that's the little voice in their head that's coming to them. But yeah, I mean, there's no solutions for that material. And yeah, Giulio's right. It's best to go into landfill. Unfortunately, there's nothing more that you can do with it. The e-waste is an interesting one, because we get, through inorganics alone, there's about 140 tonne a year of e-waste coming through our sites. So we've turned, 50% of that around from paying for end of life to deconstructing it and getting paid for that material. So, I mean, we've made hay while there's, the sun's shining, but I mean, it's not ideal. None of it's ideal. And it can get super depressing, and all the staff, every week, people are up and down because you're just flooded with material all the time. But you got to remember the good stuff that we're doing.
Yeah, kia ora. I think it's a really challenging space that we are existing in, because On one hand, there's a huge amount of me that says, you know, these are system level issues and system level solutions are what are required. But when we have so much intransigence and so much concentrated power that is absolutely resistant to the kind of simple solutions, simple, practical, easy to implement solutions like container return schemes, there is no other option but simply for people on community level basis and individual basis to take some kind of responsibility for things. And that is really, really difficult. And, you know, people are in really different places to be able to take some responsibility for, you know, depending on how much money and time and all, you know, all of those and knowledge that you have about so many things, the choices that people can make themselves are really quite limited. But we certainly are doing our best in some ways to try to make reuse, make it more attractive and make it a better option for people in the long run. But yeah, we're up against a huge behemoth, you know. Waste is a huge money spinner. And there's a lot of people getting a lot of money at the front end of extraction and production and refining and the pollution that's created at that end. And at the other end, on the disposal end, there's a whole lot of people making a whole lot of money out of that. And in between are communities, particularly communities of color, poor communities that are suffering, and and God knows the environment. So yeah, it's a big job that we've got ahead of us. But on the brighter side, you know, the best people I know in the world are the people working for a better planet. So I just want to take the opportunity to say thanks very much to the Kai Kōrero, to the four of you for your time. And to everybody that's on the call tonight, thank you very much to everybody for being part of this political movement. You know, a couple of years ago, probably nobody even knew what the heck waste energy was. I certainly didn't. But I very much do now. And I think we are trying to mainstream the issue more so that we understand this is greenwashing. This is incineration by another name, and it's not a solution for us. So so thanks again to everybody for being with us tonight. Thanks to the Kai Kōrero and all the organizations who participated in the Global Day of Action Against Incineration. We'll see you in those zero waste places and spaces, those wonderful community spaces we've got all around the country. We'll see you on the streets working for Te Tiriti, working for Māori wards, working for a better Aotearoa katoa. So kei te mihi ki a koutou, he karakia whakamutunga mō tēnei hui. Unuhia te pō whirimarama, tomo kia te ao whatu tangata, tatai ki runga, tatai ki raro, tatai ahorau, haumi e huie, tai ki e. Ko Māori e whānau.
Tina koe vēl, tina tātou.